$1 trillion is moving through the tech economy right now, faster than almost any capital cycle in history. And the people focused on chatbots are missing where the real money is going. The real impact of this spending isn't obvious yet, but it's already beginning to reshape how the global economy works. This is a massive physical infrastructure build-out similar in magnitude to the interstate highway system, except this time it's all happening in a couple of years. This creates very real winners and very real losers. Now, Amazon CEO recently confirmed $200 billion in CAPEX spend for 2026. Google is spending $185 billion. Meta's all in for $135 billion, and that's just a few. Multi-year hyperscaler CAPEX is approaching well north of $1 trillion. To be fair, this isn't 100% AI spending, but the numbers I found suggest as much as 70 to 80% of hyperscaler CAPEX is being driven by AI infrastructure. Today, I'm going to show you who the biggest winners are and who the biggest losers are in this cycle based on this research. Why this spending is not optional, where that $1 trillion is actually flowing, and most importantly, how to position your portfolio so that you are on the right side of this massive wealth transfer before the window closes. Now, as usual, timestamps are in the description if you want to skip ahead. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more deep dive breakdowns like these. And I am not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice. Now, let's put this into perspective. In the first half of 2025, AI infrastructure added 1.1% to US GDP growth. According to Harvard economist Jason Furman, without specific investment in chips and data centers, US growth would have stalled. We're looking at $1.4 trillion in hyperscale spending by 2027. To support this, data centers are expected to double their energy consumption by 2026. Some of these facilities are already drawing over 1 gigawatt of power, roughly the output of a full-scale nuclear reactor. Now here's where it gets even more serious. Bank of America analysts point out that Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft, Meta, and Oracle are now spending so aggressively that their combined CAPEX equals roughly 94% of their operating cash flows. So in plain English, they are spending almost every single dollar they make just to keep building. And when the internal cash runs out, they don't just slow down. They borrow. In 2025 alone, hyperscalers issued $121 billion in bonds, 4 times their historical average. Now, that's the debt bomb in this cycle. When companies are spending nearly every single dollar they earn and borrowing to keep pace, there's very little room for error. A construction delay, a cost overrun, or a shift in demand doesn't get absorbed. It shows up as volatility. And that's likely what we'll see moving forward. Now let's be clear, this is a forced capital cycle. Think of it like a high-speed race. If you don't upgrade your engine, you fall behind and your passengers jump out into a faster car. These companies aren't just chasing new clients, they're spending billions to make sure that they don't lose the ones they have already. And that leads to the real question. If this much money is being deployed this fast, who actually ends up capturing it? When trillions of dollars move this fast, it isn't scattered aimlessly. The majority of this capital is flowing into physical infrastructure. Big tech is no longer just a collection of software companies. They've actually become the world's most aggressive industrial developers and, increasingly, utility operators. Now, we aren't just talking about more servers. We're talking about gigawatt-scale AI factories. Now, these are facilities so large, they require their own dedicated power plants, which is why companies like Microsoft and Amazon are literally buying nuclear reactors to keep the lights on. The ultimate example is OpenAI's Stargate project in Texas, a $500 billion fortress that will eventually draw more power than the city of Chicago. It proves that the AI cloud is actually made of concrete, chips, and nuclear reactors. Now, for us as investors, this shift from digital to physical is the most important signal of 2026. Because we don't have to guess which AI chatbot is going to win the model war. We just have to follow the money into the 5 unavoidable toll booths that every single AI company is forced to pay. This isn't speculative infrastructure being built in hopes that someone shows up. Entire sectors of society like hospitals, governments, corporations, schools, and even national defense budgets are being forced to rent AI compute just to function. So let's break down the 5 toll booths Then we'll talk about the losers and positioning. Tollbooth 1 is the most obvious. Chips. This all starts with compute hardware. But the NVIDIA-only era is over. While NVIDIA still pulls in $40 billion a quarter, the world's biggest buyers are diversifying to survive. We're seeing a massive shift towards AMD, which just secured multi-gigawatt commitments for its Instinct GPUs. But the real story is internal chip development. Google just deployed its TPU V7 Ironwood chips built with Broadcom, which are 2 times more cost efficient than NVIDIA's at scale. Amazon is doing the same thing with Trainium, already hitting a $10 billion annual run rate. It's clear what's happening here. Hyperscalers are no longer willing to pay the NVIDIA tax. If they can build the brains themselves, then they're going to do it. Now that's just part of the chip story. Don't forget we need memory. Micron and Samsung have already sold out of their entire 2026 supply of high bandwidth memory. Now before we move on, there's another layer or else this entire chip tsunami collapses. Modern AI chips aren't just silicon. They're dense 3-dimensional stacks engineered at the nanometer and atomic scale. And to build this stuff, you need some of the most complex machines ever created. It starts with ASML's $380 million lithography systems. But it doesn't just stop there. You also need ultra-pure chemicals, insane precision tooling, and a supply chain so specialized that a handful of companies on Earth can even participate in this. And as these chips get denser, materials like copper and silver become critical for managing the exploding heat. Okay, so moving on to Tollbooth number 2, which is data centers. These are physical AI factories. All those chips need a home, and this means real estate, power, infrastructure, and heavy construction. AI lives in massive data center campuses built out of land, concrete, steel, copper, fiber, cooling systems, and grid connections that look more like a utility than a tech product. They need high voltage substations, redundant power feeds, backup generation, liquid cooling loops, reinforced floors, fire suppression, security, and human teams running it 24/7. Now, every one of those pieces has its own supply chain, which is why this toll booth absorbs enormous amounts of capital. According to industry analysis, there are nearly 3,000 data centers under construction or in the planning pipeline across the US, on top of the 4,000 to 5,000 facilities already operating today. And this just isn't about new builds. Many of those existing sites still require ongoing refurbishment and upgrades to handle AI workloads. So some of the companies directly in this path include CoreWeave, Iron, and Applied Digital. They aren't betting on which AI model is smarter, they're betting on power, land, and speed. Now, in the AI build-out, ownership of buildings, land, and power is where long-term leverage and pricing power sits. Next up, the networking toll booth. To train a massive AI, you don't just use one computer. You use 100,000 of them. And for those chips to behave like a single system, they have to communicate with extremely low latency and massive bandwidth. In other words, massive speed. And that's where networking comes in. Companies like Arista Networks sell the high-speed switches required to make this possible. As these systems get bigger, they need more switches and faster gear. The other big name people might recognize is Cisco Systems, who also sell similar hardware, switches, routers, and networking gear. Next up, tollbooth number 4 is power and cooling. Modern data centers will fail if the grid can't keep up. In 2025, the giants stopped waiting for the government and actually started securing their own power. Microsoft restarted 3 Mile Island in a deal with Constellation Energy. Amazon bought a data center campus directly connected to a nuclear plant. And Google is commissioning 7 small modular reactors. Companies like Vertiv sell equipment that brings electricity from the grid into the data center. That includes transformers, switchgear, power distribution units, backup systems. You also have players like Invent Electric and Johnson Controls, which provides the electrical enclosures, cooling systems, and climate control needed to keep these facilities running without overheating. Now let's hit the last toll booth, real estate and infrastructure. Before a single AI chip turns on, you need land, permits, concrete, and power. This is the physical foundation. AI data centers aren't normal buildings. They require more electrical wiring and cooling, which is why contractors like EMCOR and Comfort Systems are seeing demand surge. And then you have the new landlords, companies like Applied Digital and Iron. They started as Bitcoin miners, but that gave them one thing everyone wants: land with power already secured. Applied Digital has a roughly $16 billion lease backlog, and Iron controls over 4.5 gigawatts of capacity. Now that you've seen where the money actually goes, let's talk about what gets destroyed. Because when capital reorganizes at this scale, it always leaves casualties behind. And in this cycle, the middle layer is where most of the damage shows up. Think about cloud resellers, generic hosting providers, and software companies without scale. They continue to lose relevance as hyperscalers start to build and own more of the stack. And yes, in my opinion, this shift is a big reason software stocks are getting hit hard in 2026. Okay, so now for the trillion-dollar question: will all of this investment actually pay off? The answer is yes, but not for everyone. The big mistake here is thinking that this spending is optional, like the CEOs are just lighting money on fire because AI is trendy. This is actually defensive CAPEX. They're spending because if they do not spend, customers leave. Mark Zuckerberg put it best when he explicitly stated that the biggest risk is not taking any risk. He explains that the real danger is underinvesting rather than overspending in AI. So this is not just chasing new growth. It is actually protecting trillions in existing revenue, ecosystems, and pricing power. And in the short term, it's going to look messy. Margins take a hit, cash flow gets harder to read, Wall Street freaks out, and stocks swing around. That's just the reality of trying to build the next layer of the economy in real time. AI doesn't remove the need for people. It shifts where people matter the most. Humans still own judgment, accountability, security, and liability. If a hospital gets a diagnosis wrong, if a bank makes a bad credit call, if a government system fails, you don't blame the model. A human signs off, and that is why human oversight becomes more valuable, not less. And software doesn't disappear either. In fact, it matters more now. Raw compute by itself is useless unless someone turns it into systems that actually work. The winners here are the platforms already embedded in how companies operate. Things like Microsoft, Salesforce, or Intuit, because AI doesn't replace those systems, it actually gets layered into those systems. So where do you actually put capital in this cycle? Beyond the mega caps, everyone already knows, and the companies that I mentioned throughout this video, the real opportunities sit directly in the path of the build-out, not the hype around it. And a quick reminder, a lot of the names in this video already ran up hard. So this isn't about blindly buying anything. Risk still matters here. The pattern is simple. Chips, memory, power, land, and cooling all matter immensely. If you design the silicon, you get paid. If you control the memory, nothing ships without you. If you own the electricity in a constrained grid, you gain pricing power. If you own land with power already attached, then you become a landlord to the AI economy. And if you keep these systems from overheating, you sit in the middle of every single build-out. That's why the most interesting plays aren't about guessing which AI model wins. It's about owning the bottleneck every model depends on. If you want the exact stocks and price levels I'm watching, check out the next video on the 2026 AI watch list and subscribe to be notified of that video. Now let's zoom out. This is not just a US tech story. It's a global reallocation of capital toward the physical layer: power, land, grid, capacity, and industrial speed. Countries and regions with cheap, stable electricity, fast permitting, and political stability gain leverage. And this is where geopolitics enters. Chips, memory, transformers, cooling, and power equipment are not just commodities anymore. They are strategic assets, and that is why we're seeing reshoring, subsidies, export controls, and national security wrapped around supply chains. So, if there is one takeaway, it is this: AI is not just changing software. It is reshaping global capital flows, industrial strategy, and geopolitical power. The real winners of this era are not just the ones with the best prompts. They are the ones who control the physical foundations AI depends on, and the software and human systems that make it safe, reliable, and accountable. That is the part almost everyone misses, and that is where the real story is. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for my next video. We'll see you later.